Hello friends, I am Dr. Tenzin Thakur from the Department of Environmental Studies of Ramanujan College. I welcome you all to this session of the Faculty Induction and Orientation program in which we will focus on the environment and its importance. The relationship between humankind and the environment is a dynamic relationship that has existed from the dawn of civilization. There has been a huge human struggle to survive by overcoming the forces of nature, and at the same time, there has been efforts to understand environment and live harmoniously with her. Ancient Indian wisdom tells us of Vasudevaya Kutumbakam. The world is a family. In the manner in which every element of the earth, the living and the non-living, are integrated into one large synthesis of life. But the last few centuries, with rapid industrial development, the balance between humankind and nature has been put to tremendous stress, with the belief that the growth and prosperity of human society can only be achieved by the exploitation and control of nature and its resources. Although there are a few communities and even individuals who have put in an effort to maintain a harmonious relationship with nature. But it is very obvious that the overexploitation of the available resources has led us to compromise our own sustainability. It almost seems that the survival of the human race is at stake. On one hand, we have mega natural geographical disasters due to extreme climate changes, creating worldwide havoc. On the other, we are in midst of a pandemic created by a microscopic organism on which we seem to have no control. It brings us to a moment of introspection. We need not only critically analyze every human action that has an impact on the fragile environment of its planet, but also to think of ways in which we would create an environmentally sustainable development paradigm. With these thoughts in mind, we offer you 3 segments in our program today. First, we have a recorded lecture on understanding the fundamentals of environment and its various aspects. In the second and the third segment, we show you 2 films. The first is a short film on the environmental initiatives taken by Ramanujan College to create an environment-friendly campus, and the second on the initiatives taken by Merino Industries on how a mega industry nurtures the environment that surrounds its factories. Both these films are created by the teachers and the staff of Ramanujan College. So let's begin with our first segment on understanding the fundamentals of environment by Ms. Charvi Kapoor, faculty in the Department of Environmental Studies, Ramanujan College. She will be talking about the basic aspect of environment and its components and how we perceive it in modern times. As academicians, we can play a pivotal role to bring about a change in the society by doing research in this area and also by teaching students and making them aware of the environmental challenges.
Welcome to all the teachers, who are part of this program. So in this session, we will be talking about, environment. And I think all of us sitting here would really relate to this because, environment is something which is all around us. It is all our surroundings. So, let's get started. So, if you know the history of the term of the environment, it was derived from the French word environ, which actually literally means your surroundings. So, anything and everything which surrounds us, that is all the living beings, which is actually known as your biotic component, and non-living or abiotic components present in the nature, form the environment. Actually, that's the basic thing. Also, if you have to go into a lot of, technical definitions, I think many of us would know that, the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, defines the environment as, environment includes water, air, and land, and the interrelationship which exists among and between water, air, and land, and human beings, other living creatures, plants, microorganisms, and property. That's how, under a legal act, it is defined. Yes, and the interactions between your biotic and the biotic components lead to a functional ecosystem which helps in sustaining life on earth. That is why we all are existing. and we all get a lot of basic goods and services, which are present on the earth, and we are using them. Like, for example, air, clean air we want clean water, food, fodder, medicines, all these things form your environment. Also, if we talk about how the classification of subject, or what environmental studies as a subject deals with. So environmental studies, it is a multidisciplinary subject which studies about various dimensions: scientific, social, cultural, economic, political, and many more. So it's all the issues, challenges related, and also we tend to find tangible solutions in a very holistic way once we study your environmental studies. It also studies the human environmental interaction, and the interactions which are happening at the macro level, also at the micro level. In addition to just focusing on scientific aspects, it also deals with your socio-economic, cultural, traditional, legislation, that is your laws, historical dimensions, all these things which cover your environmental issues. Also, if we have to think about environmental studies as a subject, often we hear that it is a multidisciplinary subject. What do you mean by exactly meaning multidisciplinary? It means interaction of various subjects or disciplines. Basically, multidisciplinary would mean the interaction of various subjects or disciplines. Why we are saying this for environmental studies? We'll just understand that. Why? Because environmental studies deals with a lot of aspects, both biotic and abiotic components, which include the environment. Also, environment and the issues which are related are very complex in nature. We all understand that. There's just not one thing involved, but there are many variables which are involved in this. Therefore, we need different people. We need a lot of disciplines which are involved. A lot of subjects are involved to understand this. We need different people who have different expertise in this. And we have to understand the different aspects of the environment. That is why we need this. We also require, to resolve different environmental issues, this is required. So that is why it is an amalgam of different people, different subjects, and people coming from different disciplines as well. That's what I'm trying to just tell you. So, for example, if we just want to have a simple example as to what do we understand by the multidisciplinary nature of environmental studies. So it can be basically understandable, can be understood by a very basic example. For example, if we have any dam project, any mining project, it has to be proposed, it has to be finalized in any region of our country. So before starting such a project, we usually carry one environmental impact assessment, right? I think everybody would be aware of that. So to conduct this, to assess and to mitigate the possible degradation of the environment and the population which is living in that region, we have to really see effectively and conduct the EIA in such a manner so that we are able to identify all the causes which are involved. For example, we might require somebody who is from a life sciences background, somebody who understands zoology, botany better. For example, the biological diversity of the region could be studied by somebody who is from life sciences. For example, we would require somebody from earth sciences, somebody who's from a geography or a geology background to study the geographical terrain there, seismic activity which can happen or get involved after we come up with the project. Then somebody from a chemical sciences background, because to understand the chemical process which would take place under the matrices of the environment. Somebody who might be a historian, or somebody coming from anthropology to assess the historical aspects present in that region. What is the tribal population there, percentage of people who are coming from different tribes, the traditions which they are following, right? And somebody from a social science background to understand as to what impact the project would have socially on people. The legal aspect as to what the project activity, if it comes, what are the different legal aspects that we have to look into. For example, the land acquisition, relocation, rehabilitation, that a person from a legal background would be able to look better. Then something somebody who's from a mathematics background, or a modeling or statistics, if you have to carry out certain models, computational models, to understand as to what changes would come up when we come up with this project. So such things, after this example, you might understand as to why different people from different backgrounds, different disciplines are required to study one problem that we have in environment. So I assume that all of us who are sitting here would be from different backgrounds. So somebody from a social sciences law, mathematics, chemistry, botany, zoology, might understand this now, that, why we are calling environmental studies as a multidisciplinary subject. So, with this example, I hope, this gets clear. So now we understood the multidisciplinary approach the subject has. So this actually takes us down to the scope of the subject as well. So the subject has a lot of scope, definitely. In the academics, definitely schools and colleges, universities across India and abroad, they are also teaching this subject, at the undergraduation, post-graduation level. For example, at Ramanujan here, we have just introduced a new course on BSc Honors Environmental Science just last year, 2020, that too in COVID. So, that's a great progress that we have done. And also, along with the AECC courses, definitely that we have just introduced this one course. So definitely in the academics, this definitely has a scope. Research and development, definitely it has a scope, because a lot of environmental issues, challenges which we need to mitigate with the cost-effective technologies, and a lot of work needs to be done on the research front as well. Industrial applications are definitely there, because we need environmental guidelines and technologies to mitigate the environmental degradation that we have, directly and indirectly, which is caused by industry. So the norms, the number of industries which have been actually in India, recruiting a lot of environmental engineers, experts and scientists. So definitely industries also do, have a scope. Then also ministries and agencies, agencies such as UNEP, IPCC, these are agencies, which are recruiting a lot of people who are, from the background of environment. And also we have our MOEFCC, definitely, which has its headquarters in New Delhi. So they're also, recruiting a lot of environmental graduates. Also consultancy work, NGOs are, a lot of NGOs like Bombay Natural History Society, IUCN, Conservation International, WWF, Wildlife Trust of India. So these are places, which are actually recruiting a lot of environmental graduates as well. So definitely the scope is too much. I would say it is like really high, just that we need to see that. So also a scope is there in your green journalism, environmental awareness through the media, environmental legislations through advocacy is also very much important, and gaining a lot of importance in these days. So the next thing which we would discuss is your environmentalism. I think that is something we all would have heard somewhere. So what is environmentalism? It is actually a movement. It is actually one ideology that aims to reduce the impact of human activities on your earth, and on various species which are inhabiting your earth. So the movement has been brought by a lot of people. A lot of events have resulted in this, and we are going to see that. So the next slide, I hope you can see that the next slide has a list of events which has happened across across the globe, which have actually been very important for us to understand as to how environmental degradation has taken place, and what are those events which have actually resulted in a rush of feelings where we feel that yes, we need to save the environment, yes, we understand this. So that has been done through various events. Various people have spoken about this. Various people have done some things which are very important for the environment. So we are going to see what are those important events, landmark events, and what are those people who have just contributed to this feeling of environmentalism which we understand these days. So there was one book which was very famous and is known as Silent Spring by Rachel Carson in 1962. So this book raised the issue of excessive use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides in the United States, and its impact on different biotic and abiotic components of the environment. And I think this book is discussed everywhere whenever we teach this field of environment to any of the students, because it is one of the landmark publications that we had. Then in 1970, we had a book on limits to growth by the Club of Rome, which also attracted a lot of global attention. Also, apart from this, we've had a lot of conventions, international treaties in the field of environment, which has also given us a glimpse of, how this has been discussed at an international level. For example, you have Ramsar Convention, which is just based on the wetlands, and it has come up in 1971. Also, every year, we see the Day of Wetlands, which is known as the World Wetlands Day, which is on 2nd February. Also, a very important conference which was taken up in 1972 was United Nations Conference on Human Environment, and it was organized at the Stockholm on till 5th to 16 June, where India also represented its view on the environmental degradation. Also, in the remembrance of this conference, we also celebrate the World Environment Day, which is celebrated every year on 5th June. Also, India has also, started a lot of projects, for example, Project Tiger, Project Elephants, to save a lot of species of animals also. So we had some really disastrous events, which the world has actually witnessed. For example, in India, we had the Bhopal gas tragedy, which was, which happened on 2nd and 3rd December of 1984. Then we have Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which happened in 1986, which really not only taught lessons in India, but across the globe as well. Later on, we also came up with a lot of conventions like, Vienna Conventions, Montreal Protocols, which were signed to, save and protect your ozone layer from, getting depleted by your ODS, which is known as ozone depleting substances. Again, a very important concept was also introduced, which is your sustainable development, which was, introduced by the Brundtland Commission report in the report named as Our Common Future in 1987. Then, we also had a panel, which is known as the IPCC panel, which also came into existence in 1989 to formulate a lot of a big framework on climate climate change and global warming as well. Again, Agenda 21 was also adopted in the Earth Summit, which was in 1992. So a couple of events like these have been landmarked in across the globe to understand and to see that environmentalism has taken a step forward with every other step which we are taking, in India or maybe, outside. Been important people also whose contributions, are remembered. For example, you had, Jadav Payang, who's also known as the Forest Man of India. Why he's known like that? Because, his contribution as an environmentalist was great because he created a 550 hectare long man-made forest all by himself. Also, we have Medha Patkar, who's one of the most famous environmentalists, in India, since, she initiated the Narmada Bachao Andolan as well, and she was also awarded, for her dedication, she was also awarded the Right to Livelihood Reward. Also, we have, Mr. M.C. Mehta, who's again, a very important and eminent, environmental lawyer. You can call him environmental lawyer or environmental advocate, who's been fighting a lot of cases, like, for example, for Ganges, for, for the corrosion of Taj Mahal. All these things were, definitely undertaken by him. M.S. Swaminathan ji, definitely, he's also known as the father of India's Green Revolution. He has worked immensely on agriculture research and plant genetics and, a production of high technology of, invention in wheat crops. We have Mr. Rajendra Singh, who's also known as the Waterman of India. He's immensely worked on the efficient water management and harvesting in India, rejuvenation of and revival of various water bodies in India. His contribution has been highly critical in terms of, saving a lot of water resources for us and also, building and constructing a lot of water structures in a lot of villages in India. He was also awarded the Stockholm Water Prize for his work, in 2015. Also, last but not the least, we have Sundarlal Bahuguna ji, the man who actually taught Indians to hug trees and to protect the environment. I think all of us would have, heard his name getting related to Chipko movement. He was one of the main leaders of Chipko movement in northern India in 1970s, and a lot of people followed him. For example, Chandi Prasad Bhatt and other people really followed him and his ideology, and we see a lot of movements happening in India because of his contribution. So he's done a lot of great work for us, and to realize the importance of nature, he's just taught us how trees are important for us. So he's also one of the prominent people, and his contribution is always definitely remembered. Next we come to ecosystems. As to we've understood what environment is, what do you mean by environment, what is the feeling of environmentalism, what and who were those people who were very important for us and their contributions, what were those landmark events, and what does one environment constitutes, the biotic and the abiotic component. So, we've also heard the term of ecosystem. So, what is an ecosystem? It is the living element which, interact with each other and with their counterpart of the non-living environment, which provides us with a lot of benefits and services, around the world. And there are certain ecosystem services that we get. As humans, we are always extracting a lot of, things from the environment, and these services which we get from the ecosystem are known as ecosystem services. If we have to really define them, for example, the ecosystem provides us with a lot of nutritious food, clean water, good climate, supporting the pollination of crops, which is very important for food, soil formation. For example, whenever we feel very stressed out, we really, want to go for a recreational, adventure, the cultural aspects of the environment and the spiritual benefits that we get. So these are, clubbed under your ecosystem services. If you see the screen, if you see the slide which is there, you can see the classification of ecosystem services. So ecosystem services, have been classified into 4 categories by your Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Report of 2005. So, you can see those 4 classes. So one is a supporting, definitely, soil formation, biodiversity, production, habitat, all these are supporting services. Provisioning, something which is provided to us, food, wood, clean, good water, good air, medicines. Then regulating services, for example, climate regulation, pollination of crops, carbon storage, and controlling flooding. Again, last but not the least, cultural aspects as well. For example, getting inspired from the environment, recreational activities that we do. You use the recreational value of any ecosystem. Education, definitely, and your aesthetic value. Actually, understand by these, set of services which we have, which are 4 in number. What do we understand? Provisioning. It includes, materials and products which you are directly getting from the nature, like your fruits, vegetables, crops, honey, anything. I think we all understand this, right? Timber for furniture, construction, fiber, medicines, oil. I think that's very clear. Regulating services, these are services that humans obtain by the maintenance of the basic functioning of the ecosystem. For example, your purification of air, water, climate regulation, flood control, carbon storage, prevention of soil erosion, and many more, definitely. Then you come to the cultural services. Humans, live in nature and, we are constantly interacting with it. So we definitely often, most of the time, change it, and in turn, the nature has to change, right? So the cultural services are the non-material benefits that, contribute to the progress and the cultural advancement of people. It includes the role of, ecosystems at your local, national, and in your global cultures as well. It includes, for example, like what we discussed earlier as well, the spiritual enrichment, intellectual development, education, recreation, aesthetic values, and, anything, etc. Supporting services, lastly, would, include the processes which are very much essential for the sustenance of the ecosystem, which in turn, sustain life on the planet. It includes, various processes like your biogeochemical cycles, photosynthesis, creation of your soil, water cycles, and, supporting services are very much essential for the existence of your other services as well, like which include your provisioning, regulating, and your cultural services as well. So till now, we've understood that, there are so many ecosystem services that we are getting, and we are using them as humans, So one thing we all, always keep on listening is the degradation of the natural resources that we have. So, what natural resources we use? I think humans are very selfish. They are using everything, be it water, be it air, soil, land, forest resources, groundwaters, fishery, everything, is anyway coming to the use of humans. But, as humans, we also have to care about the environment. That's the missing part. That's the missing link that, in today's world, we are just, having that greed to, utilize and overexploit the resources, which leads to their degradation. So, for example, if you see on the screen, if you see the presentation, the slide which has been there, so you can see the degradation of natural resources, it is declining, the productive capacity is declining, and, the sustainable use is not there because we are over-exploiting it. So, once you over-exploit any natural resource, the degradation can, lead to a condition which is known as your vulnerability. So, what is vulnerability? Again, if we are over-exploiting, overusing something, it increases our vulnerability to a lot of things. For example, you can have an increased risk of poverty, food and water insecurity, livelihood issues, displacement of people, and also ill health as well. So, all these changes, all these, aspects of your degradation and increased vulnerability, they're actually exaggerated by the effects of climate change, which, we understand is a very problematic situation. And, a lot of things which are happening currently in the environment are because of the exaggerated impacts of climate change. Example, when we see the next slide, so this has been taken from a research publication paper, and this has been taken from a paper which is based in Ethiopia, but they're talking a lot of what are the impacts on the natural resource use, how does it impact people, what are the conflicts one feels, one faces when environmental resources are degraded. So once the resource is degrading, it can, cause a lot of conflicts as well, a lot of environmental impact. So once your natural resources are disrupted, it has a lot of environmental impacts. For example, the human impacts would include a lot of conflicts, a lot of social unrest, livelihood issues, wars. For example, you can take the example of water, in India and maybe across, around the globe also. For example, for a water resource, when there is less amount of that particular resource, a lot of conflicts, community conflicts are also arising. So, that is again a very important human impact as well. Natural resource degradation, it gets worst when these impacts are really exaggerated. For example, you will see these impacts of the natural resource degradation in the form of, soil erosion, degradation of your soils, deforestation, which is your cutting down of trees, wildlife and your, rangeland degradations, loss of biodiversity, flora and fauna, water quality getting degraded, habitat fragmentation, because you are over exploiting your forest. So, that would lead to habitat fragmentation as well. Again, finally, degradation of all your ecosystem services, which we have discussed in the previous slides as well. One thing which we discussed just now is, exaggeration by the impact of climate change, So climate change is definitely, a very important scenario, which has been a very problematic situation for all of us, I think. And, in the past times, if you see in the pandemic time of, last 2020 and till now, there have been so many extreme events, and, they have been regarded as, impacts as something which are, after effects or, the effects of your climate change as well. The recent IPCC, which is the AR6 2021, which has just come up in August, they have, it's extremely, they've just made few headlines, which I've just quoted here, for your, so that you can see as to what they've quoted. So they are saying, the human influence, it has really warmed the atmosphere, the ocean and the lands. And, such changes which are very widespread and rapid in the atmosphere, ocean and, cryosphere and biosphere, they've occurred very importantly here. The global surface temperatures, they have continued to increase, and, these global warming of 1.5 and 2 degrees will be exceeded during the 21st century, unless we see deep reduction in CO2 levels and other greenhouse gas emissions. Statistics from your recent IPCC AR6 report. Again, what are these extreme weather events which I'm talking about? I think we all have seen a lot of newspaper clippings, a lot of news on internet, and a number of places. For example, in Europe, a lot of extreme rains, floods and heat waves have occurred. Wildfires in US have intensified. For example, I think we have heard about the heat dome in Canada, extreme temperatures, people dying. That has been very rare, and it has just come up. Droughts in Brazil, again your floods in the Asian part of the country, again China, India, Indonesia facing a lot of floods. Also in India, we all here understand there have been a lot of northern states like Rajasthan and UP, which have been suffered a lot because of floods. For just the explanation part, I've just taken this from the recent IPCC AR6 report only. This image, which I've taken, shows the projected changes in the extreme events, and how their frequency have increased. So, for example, if you see to your extreme left, under the scenario of 1850 to 1900, you see that in a 10-year cycle, this extreme event used to happen once. But as per their modeling, as per what they're predicting, as the temperatures increase to 1 degrees, 1.5, 2, 4 and so on, the future global warming levels, the number of the extreme events which are going to happen will definitely they will also increase. The intensity of these events will definitely increase. So the 1850 to 900 the part which is to the extreme left is something which is your you can say that something where global warming and climate change was not prevalent. So the impact of your extreme event was just once in that era. But now when you see the future global warming levels, this has increased to 2.8 times, 4.8 times, 5.6 times, and it has just gone to 9 times as well. So this is very problematic. This is for a 10-year event. For example, the next, if you see the right side figure, it is for a 50-year event. For the extreme events like droughts. Again, if you go to the next slide, they are showing it for a heavy precipitation for a 10-year event. Again, you can actually see, the pre-eras where, we didn't have any human influence and we didn't have climate change issues. It was just once. The frequency of any extreme event occurring was just once. And now we've moved so forward, and we're predicting with the help of models, and that's what the IPCC is also mentioning, that with respect to the future global warming levels, with the increase in temperatures, the occurrence of these extreme events, be it droughts, be it heavy precipitation, this have actually increased a lot. The likelihood of happening such an event, which you can see on the slide as well, has actually increased, which is definitely a very alarming situation for us. I would just like to conclude very soon. So, for example, the pandemic, which was the, COVID-19, which we are still surviving, it is part of life now. We've learned a lot of lessons from the pandemic as well. For example, nature got really protected once we were, in a lockdown, because there was no disturbance, there were no humans on the road. So, the birds were coming out, trees getting nurtured, air quality getting better, water quality getting better, because the industries were really shut. So, all these are very positive impacts of the pandemic. Though we understand the pandemic has been bad for all of us, definitely. But, when we see that, the human influence, which was actually reduced during the COVID-19 pandemic, actually resulted, in a good environment, actually resulted where our environment could actually breathe. So, this is just an example, where we can actually relate, and we should actually do and, follow such things. We should not wait for a pandemic to, to save our environment. This is a lesson, we should take the positive aspects of it and, follow this, so that we can let the nature breathe, let the environment breathe, so that we can breathe, and we can live a better life in the future. Come to the end of the presentation, I would just discuss one last thing, that is, sustainable development, and what is the role of a teacher, what we can do as faculty members to inculcate small aspects, which help us deal with sustainability. So what is, sustainability? It has 3 pillars: economic, social and environmental, and all the 3 pillars need to be satisfied. Then only that action is certainly known as a sustainable action. Teachers, we can definitely, talk about sustainability, talk about environmental sustainability specifically at our own campuses. After my lecture, you're going to definitely see one video which has Ramanujan's, sustainability aspects which they have taken care of at the campus, and that is also something which I think all of us sitting here can also take an example and clue and do that. These small actions can actually lead us to a bigger change which we require in today's world, and we can prepare our students for the future. We have to inculcate this idea of sustainable development in them, so that in future we have the resources for the future generations as well, and they do take this idea forward. This can be understood by small examples. For example, as at home also we try to not waste water. For example, RO water, right? A lot of water gets wasted, so we want to save that water, wash clothes out of it and do water our plants. So some of these things can also be taken at the campus as well, and students can be, through the education mode, we can prepare them for the future and inculcate this idea of sustainability in them. And be it home, be it college, be it school, definitely the teacher has a definite role. At home, maybe you would be working as an individual in a separate role, but as once you come outside premises, we also have this responsibility to inculcate and help our students to learn better. So with this, I would like to end my lecture, and also with one last thought that you can just see it on the presentation as well, which is being loaded. The goal of life is living in agreement with nature. This is a very good quote which I found, and I find it very interesting, because we have to question ourselves: are we really having one agreement with nature or not, or are we just having all the disagreements with nature? We really have to think about it. Then only we can change our own actions. Thank you so much for being patient and listening to my lecture. And there are certain references which I have referred for making this presentation. And further, I have also just suggested few readings which, if anybody is interested, can also go through that. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Ramanujan College is an environmentally conscious organization that has taken up various initiatives to address the need for harboring an environmentally friendly campus. We have captured those initiatives in a short film. We hope this film helps you to understand and appreciate that even at a micro level, positive interventions can take us a long way to provide a more sustainable environment.
Sheltered within the 7 acres of the densely populated heart of South Delhi, very near the commercial hub of Nehru Place, surrounded by a concrete jungle of residential colonies and office buildings, is the lush green oasis of the Ramanujan College campus. With a vision of building a better world, Ramanujan College incorporates within its philosophy the creating of an environment that ushers in growth and prosperity. The tree-bounded periphery of the college provides comforting shadows to the well-maintained playgrounds and lawns that creates a serene atmosphere. A few years ago, an ancient peepal tree right in the heart of the college showed signs of decay and death. The anxious college consulted the best of scientists and environmentalists and revived the tree. Today, the tree provides a canopy of shade and care on all. It is the symbol of what a caring human touch can do to nature. Every year, the students of the college plant trees during Van Mahotsav, celebrating nature and resulting in an increasing green cover. The college has a park that is exclusively dedicated to herbal plants. In an effort to make the campus a zero waste area, the organic waste generated is biodegraded and made into manure by a machine. The manure produced is used to nourish the green in the college. All paper waste and electronic waste is handed over to recycling agencies. In the past 5 years, the college has recycled more than 5,600 kgs of paper waste, thus saving approximately 100 fully grown trees from being cut down. Likewise, Ramanujan College judiciously uses paper in the offices. The biomedical hazardous waste generated by the medical room of the college is disposed through a certified agency. The entire campus and the built-up areas of the college is equipped with water harvesting facilities. Rainwater runs down from the roofs through pipes and flows into drains. The carefully designed pathways and spaces allow for water not to be accumulated, but flow into the drains that take the water to a huge tank that is located below this well-kept cricket field, in which all rainwater is harvested. The accumulated rainwater in this underground tank provides water for the lawns, playing fields, and the plants in the campus. Harvested rainwater recharges the aquifers, which has increased the water level of the entire area that now benefits many residential colonies surrounding the college. Sewage water generated in the building is stored in a sewage tank from where it is sent to an in-house sewage treatment plant. The plant has an enormous capacity to treat 240 kiloliters of sewage per day. The clean water is cycled back for non-drinking usage. The bio-toilet of the college decomposes organic human waste. Drinking water from municipal pipelines is stored in special tanks. In the water treatment plant, it is purified and pumped to overhead water tanks, from where it is supplied after an RO filtration process. The green cover that surrounds the college helps in filtering the dust-laden polluted air and aids in oxygenating the air. The architectural design of the college prevents sound pollution as it keeps the classrooms away from the high octave sounds of the busy road that surrounds the college. The corridors of the building are large and spacious. The classrooms are well lighted and ventilated, reducing the need of electrical lights and fans. The sun's radiant energy is transformed into 160 kilowatts of electrical energy by the solar panels installed on the roofs of the entire college. Facing the sun, the solar panels convert sunlight into electricity, which is passed on to the main grid. The college not only saves electricity, but is also contributing to the nation in its clean energy needs. There are energy-saving LED lights in the corridors of the college. The college has installed a number of solar lights that illuminate the pathways at night. Regularly, the college conducts an environmental audit through an authorized agency. This includes a green audit as well as an energy audit. At Ramanujan College, we are conscious that as humans on this earth, the more we gather ourselves in the arms of nature, the more enriched our lives will be.
In the final section of today's program, we present another film that determines the intersecting points of industry, academics and the environment. Merino Industries, located about 60 kilometers away from our college in the town of Hapur in Uttar Pradesh, specializes in the manufacturing of laminates and has also diversified interests in agro-products. Led by its visionary managing director, Shri Prakash Lohia, the organization is acutely conscious of the industry's responsibility towards the environment. Consciousness and concise merge as Merino Industries collaborate with the best of consultants and scientists, environmentalists and academic institutions to set up the highest standard of environment protection and upgradation. We present a short film on the environmental initiatives of a large industry and also its philosophy and vision towards creating a sustainable environment.
"60 kilometers east of Delhi, near the sacred river Ganga and the pilgrimage ghats of Garmukteshwar, is the ancient historical town of Hapur in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Amongst the vast agricultural fields that are famous for yielding high-quality rice, wheat and sugarcane is located the Merino Industries, which is in the business of manufacturing high-pressure decorative laminates. Merino produces a mind-boggling 35 million square meters of laminates annually. Merino is also engaged in the agro industry and is a major producer of potato mash by the brand name Vidget. With the motto of economy, excellence and ethics, the Merino Group believes that sustainable actions and outcomes create long-term values by achieving a balance between economic, environmental and social performances. Mr. Nilanjan Mukherjee, Chief Marketing Officer, spoke to us about the core values that guides Merino Industries.
Merino as an organization is driven with three values. The value of economy, that is finding value in everything that we do, in giving sustainable customer value in all our products and services. Economy in terms of being the most value conscious offering in the market. Ethics, that is really centered around honesty of purpose and honesty of transactions in a largely unorganized sector maybe. And excellence in whatever we do, whether it's in innovation, whether it is in go-to-market practices, whether it is in our own environmental management, everything is driven through innovation and excellence. Now, I just want to talk a bit about what is happening in terms of the initiatives that are being spoken about. The cultural tonalities of honesty, integrity, prudence and rightfulness permeates every aspect of the organization, whether it is in dealings with trade partners, whether it is in dealings with our customers, whether it's in dealing with our vendors, and indeed in the way we manage our entire manufacturing facilities, our product creation, our environment. I think this honesty and integrity is something that you will find in every aspect.
We visited the Merino Industries to have a first-hand experience of the initiatives taken by a large industry to protect, preserve and enrich the environment. The bright, pleasant and welcoming ambience of the factory, meticulously organized with touches of green, reflected a caring and sensitive approach to environmental concerns. Fossil fuels are one of the prime carbon footprint contributors. Merino has energy mission objectives to minimize carbon footprints of the company to ensure universal wheel and sustainability. Merino fulfills a large part of its total energy requirements through renewable and alternative energy resources of solar, biomass-based turbines and biogas, which constitute around 70% of the total energy requirements of Merino. Biomass-based turbines use massive quantities of rice husk and sawdust, which is a waste product, to produce electricity. Rice husk and sawdust is incinerated in a large furnace. The heat is used to produce steam that runs turbines to generate electricity. The smoke of the furnace is exhausted through a smokestack that has electrostatic separators that filter out the suspended matter. The exhausted smoke is remarkably free of any particulate matter. Merino takes the best of scientific advice to constantly enhance the filtration process and make it super efficient. The smoke produced as exhaust had much lower values of carbon and other polluting substance levels than what is officially allowed. So good has been the emission control of the factory that it has been the only industrial unit that was allowed to continue its operations even during the winter months of North India, when severe air pollution makes the authorities close down industrial activity in order to reduce air pollution. Next, we saw the effluent treatment plant of the factory, which treats the wastewater generated from different sources within the premises of the industry. The treated water, kept well within the permissible limits, is then used for watering the plants and is regularly checked by the Pollution Control Board. The effluent treatment plant and the organic decomposition of the potato peels waste that is generated in the potato processing plant of Merino produces gases such as methane and carbon dioxide, which are used as biogas to generate power. The biogas is used directly as an alternative energy source. After we witnessed the impressive environmental measures by Merino Industries in factories, we were introduced to major initiatives that Merino had taken towards an environmentally sustainable development in the field of agro-industry. In a laudable industry academic collaborative venture, Merino, along with the Energy and Resource Institute and the Visvesvaraya National Institute of Technology, Nagpur, has adopted a cost-effective method to convert paddy and other agro-waste into a soil-enriching compost. This is an environmentally friendly alternative to stubble burning. Large quantities of paddy straw is collected from in and around Hapur and stored in sheds. It is then reduced in size by a pulverizer. After this, the shredded and crushed paddy straws are fed into a ribbon tray, where the patented bioculture is sprayed into them and it undergoes dry digestion.
Merino Innovation Center has come up with a unique culture, a biodigester, which digests paddy straw in as less as 3 weeks time, which otherwise takes 3 months to 6 months. And the product is patented. Not only so, the product has commercialized with a title as Bajrang Band. So Bajrang Band is a very unique decomposer, microbiological consortium, which is used for rapid composting of paddy straw, which we can do as a centralized facility like what we are doing here in Merino. On a pilot level, 1 ton of paddy straw on a daily basis is being composted, is being digested, which we are now scaling up to 15 tons per day.
The primary aim of the patented bioculture is to tackle this huge problem of bio-waste and its fruitful dispensation. It is aptly named as the Bajrang Band. The mixture is then collected and stored in plastic bags, which themselves act as an anaerobic digester. With the help of the microbes in the Bajrang Band, these shredded paddy straws get decomposed in 21 days and then is an organic manure for agro use. The process is simple, but the result is a remarkable alternative to a major environmental problem. Professor Sachin Mandavgane tells us of the meaningful and valuable collaboration that Visvesvaraya National Institute of Technology has with Merino Industries.
VNIT, Visvesvaraya National Institute of Technology, and Merino Industries, we enter into an MOU, and as a part of that, VNIT is having Merino Innovation Center. In that innovation center, we are taking up different projects under the sustainability related topics. The lab work, typically we call it as development of proof of concept. The proof of concept is developed in VNIT laboratories. MTech students, PhD students, even the undergraduate student work on these topics. Once the proof of concept is established, then for scaled up study, for a pilot plant study, we come to Merino. So the understanding is following. The basic laboratory work, basic experimental work, which I would be doing maybe in 100 grams or 500 grams of quantity, is done in VNIT. We develop the proof of concept, we develop material balance, energy balance, general understanding. Once that is done, when I have to go for maybe 10 kg, maybe 15 kg, 50 kg of material, we call it as a lab plus experiments. So those lab plus experiments are carried at Merino campus, where the students who work in the laboratory, they themselves come here. So now they get the exposure of industry, and we carry out the lab plus experiments. Once the lab plus experiment are successful, we go for a pilot plant, where the couple of students are having their PhD topic around this. So they are doing their PhD as well as they are solving a real life problem. So instead of solving an unsolved problem, the students are working on the problem for which the solution is needed.
The second initiative of Merino is to rapidly increase green cover to counter the effects of deforestation and increasing urbanization. As a part of intensive forestry initiative, Merino is inspired by the Japanese strategy of the Miyawaki method of forestry. Mr. Rakesh Tirath, an avid environmentalist and a consultant to Merino Industries, spoke to us.
Let me just tell you a little bit about what this Miyawaki is. There is a very famous Japanese person by the name of Akira Miyawaki, who looked at the global problem of very high content of carbon dioxide and depleting oxygen, and he felt that there must be some way to grow intense jungles in a short period of time. So he created this protocol called Miyawaki protocol. Essentially what is done over here is that you first do the soil testing, and then you prepare the soil to be very, very rich in nutrients. And once you have done that through a very structured approach, then you do intense plantation, preferably of the native species. So what we have done over here is that we have closely about 3 plants per square meter, and these have been grown in a very intense manner, and as a result of it they compete for natural resources and they grow very fast. So if this was to be done by the nature would have taken at least double the time to reach this intensity and growth. But since we have helped these plants to grow better and quicker, you see the result. And this is an experiment. First experiment has been successful. We have put up another Miyawaki here and 2 Miyawakis in 2 of other Merino plants in Rohad, which is in Bahadurgarh. But this experimentation is not going to just stop here. Yes, it is going to improve the quality of air. It is also it is generating a microclimate where if you come here, you will find that the air is cooler, and you find the air is healthier, a lot more healthier than what you will find outside, because the oxygen level of the air in this area is far higher than what you will find elsewhere. So as I said, it is a journey, it's an experiment. We are also put up some honey over here, honeybees, and you see, possibly, I'm not very sure if you are able to see, cameraman can focus on these boxes where the honeys are busy producing honey. So we are trying that this becomes a full microclimate by itself. Uh, we saw that there are birds and the nests have been formed. So birds have arrived. There is honey. There are butterflies, and you see the subsoil is also getting enriched day by day, because the leaves, the rain, all that is enriching the. Now the jungle is self-sustainable. It does not require any care whatsoever. However, our ideas are just not stopping here. What you see on my left is a building, and it is once again Prakashji's idea, who is our managing director, to see how this Miyawaki can be suitably leveraged for reducing the air conditioning load inside the office premises, and also use the air from the Miyawaki forest to improve the quality of air, the IAQ as it is called. So this experiment is not just aesthetically important, but is also important to become an integral part of a circular economy and to reduce our operating costs and make the inside air of better quality, so that people remain more productive, happy and healthy. So now we believe that it is possible to have a replica of this in small areas, and like this we may not be able to get a large piece of land to grow jungles, but collectively we can create a large number of these small micro Miyawakis, and hopefully this is the way to go forward to arrest the increase in carbon dioxide, increase in temperature, and make this planet slowly livable again. That is the thought process.
The Miyawaki experiment is a big success at Merino Industries. This simple method of quickly generating dense forest cover in small areas may be replicated, and it is bound to show positive results. Shri Prakash Lohia, the dynamic managing director of Merino Industries, is the pivot on which all the environmental initiatives of Merino revolve. He shared his thoughts about industry and its responsibility towards the environment and human society.
We are at a point of intersection between industry, academics, and environmental concerns today. What do you think are the fundamental dynamics where these intersecting concerns would help us meet and do something good?
So the starting point is industry has to become aware and sensitive of environment and take care, right, of the environment. Environment is a very complex interdisciplinary area of science. Industries cannot have their own in-house strength to tackle this complex problem. Whereas in academics, this is the biggest advantage, that under one roof we have different functional areas or different disciplines working. That too, they are working with the latest developments, right, knowledge available. So there is a need and there are the required knowledge available. So it is natural that they should shake hands, they should come together. And this is going to help or the entire society, the nation. This is how I think.
Thank you, sir. Now, with that same thought in mind, there is an ongoing debate on industrial and infrastructural development and environmental degradation. How do you as an industrialist look at this issue?
See, there is nothing called absolute, right? So what happens is, if there is no constraint, maybe I can achieve my industrial or commercial goals by putting some by investment of some money. If the restrictions are there, the investment may be required more. maybe that investment required more is presently like in a OPEX mode, but that not taking care may cost much many times more in future. And now it is not a question of only investments and ROI, it is a question of our survival. So this is an essential part, we have to take it, there is no other alternative. The way for example we take care of it, or you know the way it is used in the management jargon, it is a hygiene factor. You have to take care of the environment, protect the environment, it is a hygiene factor, there is no other alternative. So the best way is that whatever knowledge we have in different areas, with people, with institutions, all of them should come together to face this challenge, right? And this is for the betterment of all, for betterment of everybody.
Sir, does it mean, for example, a loss of revenue in terms of profit for companies, for industry, when it makes a financial investment in environment?
Say for example an industry, when it goes for selection of a machine or a technology, what does it do? It tries to select the best machine, best technology, right? See, now environment is as essential part of machine and technology for the overall running. So we should not look at environment separately. We should not look at environment as a operational expenses. It is an investment, right? So the total economic viability should come including environment, not excluding environment. If I have to put up a effluent treatment plant to treat my wastewater, right, and put it into the government sewage system, that is an investment which is an essential part of the running industry. So this fundamental change of thinking has to be there, and the industry is run by educated people. It is run by people who understand, who are conscious, right? Then in industry we talk about stakeholders. When we adversely affect the environment, we are harming the stakeholders. So ultimately that is coming back, will come back on us. This is the way one should look at them.
What is the kind of philosophy that you anchor yourself in terms of your understanding of the environment, the ecology and the society and its needs?
Interesting question. See, if we look at the history of human civilization, right, from the state of situation of savage, when the human existence was in the vagaries of nature, human fought with nature. It was a fight for survival, right? And in the process, we not only survived, today human being or the human species is ruling the planet. When you become a ruler, you become more responsible also. Now we are facing a situation where again a survival question. If we do not align ourselves, instead of conquering, if we do not cooperate with nature, we cannot survive. So the way we survived by fighting with nature, now the same spirit has to be brought into, and to survive, cooperating with nature. This is the way an intelligent person is supposed to think. I am not talking of the spiritual side and other side. It is just simple materialistic side of for your survival of the fittest. So there is no way. And of course, in the other way you look at it, for a more harmonious life, right? your internal nature and your external nature, right? If they are harmonious, they are in a symphony, you can have, and with a more you can say calm, cool, harmonious mind, you are more creative, you come up with better solutions, right? So there are different aspects, but even if we take very basic materialistic aspect of survival of the fittest, still we don't have any option. We have to cooperate, we have to align ourselves in nature, and that is what you call it ecology, you call it environment, whatever it is. Ultimately it is alignment with nature, external nature.
With this, sir, what is your vision for Merino Industries as being one of the flag bearers for environmental protection in the next coming 10 years?
See, we have the mission and the vision, they have two aspects. One is the qualitative aspect, another is the quantitative aspect. Qualitative aspect of your mission and vision is in your own hands. Quantitative aspects, for example, today we are 2000 crores company, in 10 years we may become 20,000 crores companies. Now this can be 30,000 also, this may be 15,000 also, because there are other external factors. But Merino's real nature, Merino's what you call it, USP, its recognition is by its qualitative mission and vision. And fortunately in Merino we have a very well articulated mission and vision, right? Merino's mission is universal weal through trade and industry. Weal, universal weal means in Hindi we call it kalyan. That means without adversely affecting anybody to create prosperity is weal. It's an old English word, W-E-A-L. So universal weal through, and what is the means? The means are trade and industry, because Merino is in the field of commercial activities. So Merino will not create prosperity at the cost of others' interests. So our overall commitment to environment, stakeholders, everything is, we are drawing this inspiration from our mission statement. Our mission statement says that you should do it in this way. In vision, it sometimes it is used at, just opposite also. Some people say mission early and then the vision. Some say first vision and then the mission. But here we first say mission, and vision we have articulated as Merino. See, it is a globalized world. So Merino is preparing itself to be a global player, and for that Merino will always strive to be globally competent and globally competitive by synergizing Western work culture and Indian ethos, right? Environment, that a total in Indian ethos, I am connecting it now with our main topic of environment. In Indian ethos, environment is divinized. All forces and forces in environment, dynamics in environment are looked at as deities. Fine. So our commitment to environment is coming from our Indian ethos also. And by Western work culture we mean, see what happened. Knowledge, the science and technology was cultured more in West. Right? So for example, for any new technology we need not reinvent the wheel. Pick up the best technology possible anywhere. And very important to see, we are saying even to any company to be globally competent and globally competitive, the time has come when your environmental concern and environmental footprint will be a very important factor to make you a competitive and competent organization, right, in the world, and we are already experiencing it. We get a lot of importance and mileage in our international trade as well as in domestic because of our environment sensitive policies, work, and also added with that is our involvement in CSR activities and the overall social, say they are all connected together. I will just add here, one of the best definition of goodness, right, religiosity, I found was by Swami Vivekananda. He said, whatever expands is good, whatever is virtue, whatever contracts is vice. This strategy or look for environment helps us in expanding Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That is the basic baseline, right? This is one family. So, at what cost you are going to create wealth? That's a thing to ponder. So, the things are, all are connected with each other. There should not be any confusion in it.
No, sir. At last, I would like to ask you that what message do you have for the future generation? And do you believe that your generation can assure them to have a better and a clean and a healthier environment?
See, every generation had their challenges, but my generation is one which has seen a lot of changes, very fast changes. Right? My one message to the coming generation is they should have faith in the experiences, the reflected in the wisdom of our culture. They can get lot of solutions and guidance of the challenges they are going to face. It is a globalized world. Another way the world is looked as globalized is spiritual globalization. So we are very rich in our Indian ethos, right? How to tackle a globalized situation. So with full faith and Shraddha, they should look at that and learn from there. They have to handle this technological, I call it sometimes onslaughts of technology, because technology sometimes, like now we are talking of artificial intelligence and other things, as if they are going to be master over us. Right? Again here, to master technology, not to get enslaved by technology, one can get a lot of such, you can say, guidances from our ancient wisdom. So, I often like to share with my friends from academia is now is the most critical period and time, high time, that we should include philosophy as a elective subject for every branch, right? A subject which teaches us to question, which makes us bold enough to venture into unknown areas and question them. So this is what is my own.
So, in our institution, we have a center of ethics which also runs the School of Happiness. In terms of ethics and happiness, what do you think, again, the connecting points of environment, society, industry, growth and development? How can we be happy, if I can ask you that?
Very interesting. You have asked a question which is very dear to my heart. There is an interesting concept, and what I am telling, I may be using some sort of a old Sanskrit terms, but they are evergreen terms. Right? You can have equivalent to our modern from behavioral science and other places. You can have equivalent of the concepts. Now there is a concept called Purushartha, which is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Now let us leave moksha aside for the time being. We are talking of our day-to-day material world. Right? First is dharma. What is dharma? What you call is ethics. Dharma, the Sanskrit, in Sanskrit the beauty of Sanskrit is every word has a meaning and it is derived from a root. Dharma is derived from dhri. Yah dharayati sa dharmaha. What sustains you is dharma. So the whole concept is we should first be clear what is going to sustain us. Today, if you do not take care of your environment, nothing can sustain you. Right? So define your dharma. Within that framework of dharma, right, within those norms of do's and don'ts, then artha and kama, fulfill your desires, create wealth, spend wealth. Try to gain happiness. That's a different thing. Spirituality will say that afterwards you will find that happiness is not there, but doesn't matter. That's not our area of discussion now. So we can remain confined between these three. So if you do not teach, dharma is a word which is highly again abused and misused. Right? But this is the real meaning of dharma. It is an interesting translation of dharma is system. What is the definition of system? What sustains a system? Right? Solar system. The laws of gravity is sustaining the solar system. So the system is sustained by the norms, by the rules. So we should have. How can you have an education without a dharma? Right? However, you may not bring in religion, but you cannot avoid dharma. So I am very happy to know, it was surprising to me that an institution in our modern India which is totally in mainstream, right, has dared to bring in. I think today Rabindranath and Vivekananda would have been the most happiest people if they knew about it. I congratulate the the authorities. Yes, fantastic. I will like to know more how you are teaching dharma, the ethics, and you have already connected ethics and happiness. That is what you get happiness by fulfillment of desires through artha within the framework of dharma.
We are indeed at the intersecting point of environment, academic and industry, and is at stake is the survival of life on earth. Close engagement between industry and environment with knowledge and research support from academics is the need of the hour.
friends, we hope that you liked our program. We enjoyed creating this program for you all and making the films. Thank you so much. Have a good day.